Thank you very much for inviting me. I'm absolutely delighted to be here today. It's a real experience for me to come, and not least because I get to wear beautiful abayas. I'm going to talk to you today about 3 examples of how I use innovation when I educate. Collaborative, development, and play. And I'm going to whiz through some of it because we've heard a lot today about the theory of innovation, some brilliant examples about innovation, and I just want to really share some of my ideas with you. I'm from Liverpool, a city in the UK that was at the forefront of the first industrial revolution, which we heard a lot about earlier today, but it fell into serious decline after the Second World War, primarily due to ships, the docks, and shipbuilding. And you can see in this photograph, it's the silted up Albert Dock, which was built in the 1800s. So it's instinctively a very entrepreneurial city. It's in our DNA to want to try and trade and find new ways to develop. So obviously with the advent of Industry 4.0, it was really important to get onto the forefront of that. And one of the initiatives that I was involved with 8 years ago was part of rebuilding the city to develop its creative and digital sector. We started Baltic Creative in 2009. It's an ecosystem really for the creative and digital sectors. It's a space for entrepreneurs and creatives to really tinker and test and try and grow their ideas. It now has 153 companies operating out of a space of over 50,000 square foot. Just in the last 2 years, we've seen a 75% growth in that number of companies. 57% of those companies trade internationally. That's up from 30% just 2 years ago. So the speed that this is growing is quite phenomenal. We turn over, the companies within our scheme turn over about £16 million. Doesn't sound like a lot of money, but if you consider that it came from pretty much nothing 8 years ago. So we've got really big plans to continue, but I think what's most important about it is the fact that it's about the people. It's about the community. It's a social enterprise. So while we operate in a social enterprise operation, it's not for profit. We do want to make a profit, and we want to plow that money back into this ecosystem. So I'm quite lucky that I get to see a lot of different schemes, and there's a couple of other schemes that we're involved with as well. And we know there is a gap in digital skills, particularly for women. And Liverpool Girl Geeks have just introduced an Innovate Her scheme, which is working with schools, developing after-school clubs. You have Make Liverpool, which is about connecting traditional makers and traditional manufacturers. So I've got all of these on a slide for you at the end, but the second example I want to give you is some of the teaching that I do at various universities, and it's around the idea of creative, critical, and innovative type thinking. We've seen this slide earlier today, so I'll whiz through it, but I think what's most important to note is actually 65% of our children who go to school today don't have the jobs that they're going to do when they graduate, when they finish, don't exist yet. So we don't know what kind of jobs people are going to go into. But what we have to do, as many of the speakers have said, is prepare them for these jobs that we don't know exist. So we've seen this slide as well today about the creative and the critical thinking sides of the brain, and how one is about creating ideas and the other one is about evaluating ideas. But what I want to talk to you about is an example that I use, and I know there's a workshop finishing up now on design thinking, but I used the Stanford D School online, and I've got that link for you as well, and I adapted it to suit my students, and we went through a very, very quick process of iterating and developing, and those five points down there. And I ask my students to partner up. And they don't have to talk in front of the group. They don't have to present their ideas. They just have to talk to each other. And they just have to develop skills in listening and empathy and developing this notion of emotional intelligence. Because these skills will equip our next generation to how to work in these jobs that we don't know exist yet. I think what's really important as well is to just look at, after a 2-hour session, to just look at some of the comments that the students themselves said after spending this 2-hour session. So that forced them to think more creatively. It gets them to think about someone else's perspective, and it leads to a deeper understanding. And these are really key critical skills to embed in that next generation. And the final project that I want to talk to you about today is an example that I've been working on after researching into the footwear industry. My background is the fashion and footwear industry. And after researching for the textbook that I wrote and published earlier this year on footwear, I spent a lot of time working and discovering traditional footwear manufacturing. But I became really interested in this notion of disrupting the traditional footwear manufacturing sampling chain. So I worked with an artist called Emma Rogers and our fab lab at LJMU, a fabrication lab. And we decided we would try to 3D print some shoes. So the shoe that you can see, the grey coloured shoe there, is a very 30% size shoe. And then we scaled it up. And it was just simple tinkering around. We used the liver bird, the traditional symbol of the liver bird, for those of you that have been to Liverpool, and eventually painted it gold and kind of handcrafted it a little bit more and presented it at a wearable fashion tech exhibition. The point that I'm sharing, the reason why I'm sharing this with you, and I think it's a really important example, is because this is about playing, it's about testing, it's about tinkering, it's about hacking a traditional sculpture and turning it into a pair of shoes. Now, these shoes aren't wearable. It's an idea, it's a concept, but it gets people thinking about how you can mix different making and different manufacturing together. And I've been shortlisted for there's a fund called Open Maker, which is developed by the EU. It's a fund that's specifically set up to build relationships between traditional manufacturers and very small traditional type makers. And the fund's for €20,000. It's a lot of money to me, but it's not really a lot of money in the grand scheme of trying to help and support innovation. It's a way of seeing if you can harness that creativity in that traditional type of manufacturing and use both of those and see how Industry 4.0 can then go on to develop.
Can I sum it up?
I'm just finishing up now. This is the final one. So my concluding comments really are, it's about collaborating. It's about learning from others to discover those new ideas and to develop skills through shared experience and a shared understanding of community. So it's about tinkering, making, experimenting, building new relationships with people. I put all the web links up there, so if anybody is interested in any of those initiatives that are going on in Liverpool or in the EU, there are really some excellent examples there. Thank you.